Better balance equals a better life. Lately, I've been working on improving my balance. As you might imagine, over the last few years, this has become somewhat of a hobby for me. Some might even say an obsession. Of course, I have a professional interest in this area. Firstly, as a chiropractor dedicated to helping my patients, but also as CEO of the world's only proprioceptive orthotic company, who spends a fair chunk of his time studying, researching, and teaching other doctors about balance. However, my interest goes far beyond simply professional. My personal passion is snowboarding. And for many years, before osteoarthritis and hernia surgery, it was rock climbing. Balance matters for all the fun things we do in life. I also have 2 active young boys that are young enough to still want me to keep up with them, and I plan on keeping up with their kids in the future. Balance, or lack of it, is important throughout life, and it impacts us more and more as we age. Right now I'm working with a 92-year-old who's currently recovering from hip surgery after a fall. Now if you ask her how important balance is, I know exactly what she'll say. It's really sad to see how much her world has shrunk since that fall. It's like so many other things that we take for granted, until they're taken away. I got to witness this firsthand growing up. When I was quite young, my mum was diagnosed with Meniere's disease. In its most severe form, which she definitely had, it manifests as sudden, crippling vertigo attacks. 1 second she'd be fine, and then the next she'd just suddenly fall to the ground, feeling like the world was completely spinning around her, and be totally unable to function for the next 2 days. These attacks were unpredictable, and they could occur at any time. As you can imagine, she tried everything in her search for a cure, including drugs, surgery, special diets, health retreats. She even tried an experimental procedure where they drilled a hole in her head to relieve the pressure, which unfortunately did nothing to help. The disease doesn't really have anything to do with pressure. In the end, the only thing that worked was taking up a regular yoga practice, which she continues to this day, more than 30 years later, and she hasn't had a vertigo attack in years. So in today's episode of the Foot-Brain Connection, I thought we'd explore balance in more detail, how the brain creates our sense of balance, how it becomes dysfunctional, and how we can improve it, and why it matters for the patients that you see every day, and even for your own family. I always thought my balance was pretty good. As a rock climbing instructor, I was never quite world class, but I was pretty credible. For several years, climbing was the central focus of my life. Not only that, as a snowboarder of over 30 years, I love nothing more than threading my way through the trees on double black runs or out in the back country, even in my ultimate happy place, heliboarding. Both of those activities require a finely tuned sense of balance. But here's the thing. These are activities that you only perform with your eyes open. I was totally shocked when I discovered that in actual fact, my balance sucks. Let me explain. When we first took on Better Balance Orthotics, I knew they worked. I'd been using them both personally and in my clinic for years, but we needed ways to prove it. One of the first ways that we explored was the use of a vestibular plate. It's basically like a scale that you stand on, but instead of measuring your weight, it records your postural sway and tells you how well you can maintain your center of gravity under varying conditions. The first test is to simply stand on it with your eyes open, basically the way we usually operate in the world. This gives us a baseline reading of your normal, everyday balance. Most people do pretty well on this initial test. If not, then there's a serious issue that needs to be addressed. The next test is to close your eyes and continue to stand still. Obviously, this removes your vision from the equation. If your balance is healthy, this will increase your postural sway a little, but not too much. For the final 2 tests, we place a spongy cushion on the plate, creating an unstable surface. Test number 3 is to stand on it with your eyes open. This greatly reduces your brain's ability to sense the ground through the proprioceptive feedback from your feet. If your visual and vestibular systems are okay, this shouldn't bother you too much. But the 4th test involves standing on the cushion with your eyes closed. This was the one that really shocked me. The first time I tried it, it was like I instantly became completely drunk. I don't mean like, a little bit tipsy. I'm talking like fall down, can't walk a straight line, completely shit-faced. I couldn't believe it. I scored perfectly on the first 3 tests, but terribly on the 4th. I was actually classified as moderately reduced, but let me tell you, if that's moderate, I'd hate to experience what the folks in the severely reduced category feel like when they do the test. In fact, my team are trained to be like standing ready and ready to catch them just in case. This is actually a pattern that we see quite commonly in the clinic. By taking out vision and proprioception from the test, this test forces the brain to rely primarily on the vestibular system. That's the canals in our ears. Many people, including myself unfortunately, are almost completely unable to do this. These are significant balance and brain problems hidden in plain sight because we never walk around with our eyes closed. These are not only injuries, falls, and accidents just waiting to happen. They're also nervous systems walking around under constant stress because they're not able to manage gravity effectively. This means that there's aberrant input continuously firing into the sympathetic nervous system, triggering a never-ending fight or flight response, without the person ever even realizing why they feel so stressed, wound up, and anxious. I've seen theories suggesting that this is a major contributor to many different anxiety and mental health disorders. Chances are you see these people in your clinic every day, but almost none of them come in saying they have a balance issue, because they don't even know that they do. Let's unpack what's happening here. Recently, I had a conversation with Imran Khan Niazi, the director of the New Zealand College of Chiropractic Research Centre. Imran's one of the leading chiropractic researchers in the world, and he also has a particular interest in understanding balance. In fact, when we spoke, he'd just returned from China, where he's currently involved in researching the effects of knee injury on proprioception and balance. He explained balance like this. Our brain uses 3 inputs to create our balance: our vestibular system, proprioception, and our visual system. For the sake of our analogy, let's just say the brain relies on each of these to create 1/3 of our balance. This isn't the exact correct proportion, but it gives us the idea. The research is indicating that when we have an injury or we lose input to one of these systems for some reason, the brain shifts its attention more to the other systems to compensate. In episode 1, Welcome to the Footbrainconnection, last week, we covered how we are all losing input to our proprioceptive system thanks to wearing shoes and walking on flat, neurologically boring surfaces. I'll place a link to that episode in the comments in case you missed it. Now, this is more than just an attention shift. It's a long-term, structural, neuroplastic shift. The brain literally rewires itself to take neuronal real estate that was previously devoted to processing proprioceptive input and repurposes it for visual input instead. In this way, many people become more and more reliant on their visual system over time for maintaining their balance. And every injury, macro or micro, accelerates the process. This is how people end up in the situation I found myself in, where everything looks good balance-wise until you close your eyes, especially if you're standing on an unstable surface, like, for example, say a big cushy-soled shoe. When I think back, it makes sense. The reason I took up snowboarding at age 18 was because I first tried skiing when I was 17, and I completely destroyed my left knee. After spending all day just tumbling down the mountain, thanks to my complete lack of experience, skill, or common sense, I finally had a fall where my skis stuck into the snow and the binding didn't release, and my whole body just flipped right over it, causing my knee to bend 90 degrees sideways. As you can imagine, my medial ligament didn't really like that. I spent the next day sitting in the car park while my friends skied, because I wasn't even old enough to sit in the bar. And I spent the next several months on crutches. I can't believe I even considered going back the next year. But I was totally hooked, even after that less than fun experience. I figured that if I snowboarded instead of skied, at least my knees couldn't go in opposite directions. And so a lifelong love affair was born. This was exactly the sort of injury that Imran and his colleagues in China were studying, an insult to the knee that turned down the volume on proprioception and forced the brain to compensate by devoting more neurons and processing power to vision instead. However, that's not the only kind of injury that most of us experience. In fact, it's not even the most common kind. Although as doctors we do see those kind of injuries in our practice, I'm sure you'd agree that by far the greater amount of daily damage we see are the repetitive strain micro injuries that occur day in and day out for so many of our patients. This is where most of the real long-term damage is done, and I believe it's where the long-term destruction of our balance occurs. Day by day, with every repetitive micro-trauma, our brain is forced to rely more and more on our vision to prop up our failing vestibular and proprioceptive systems, which makes us more and more vulnerable. One place that these repetitive micro-traumas really pile up over time, yet go largely unnoticed, is in our feet. They don't often cause pain. Of course, there are exceptions like plantar fasciitis and heel spurs and Morton's neuroma, that kind of stuff. But they do become visible over time. And if you start looking at your patient's feet, you'll see them every day. For example, take bunions. Bunions are not simply a structural deformity of the MTP joint. They're actually a result of repetitive microtrauma to the plantar plate, the band of fascia that runs under the ball of our foot, which should maintain the integrity of the transverse arch. Collapsed arches aren't just the result of overpronation. They're the result of repetitive microtrauma to the plantar fascia and the intrinsic muscles that should maintain the integrity of our medial and lateral arches. These are not just destabilizing the mechanical efficiency of our feet. They're slowly and progressively turning down our brain's ability to rely on the proprioceptive input from our feet and pushing us into a more and more heavily vision-reliant state to try and maintain our balance, which becomes an even greater problem when your visual acuity begins to decline or when you're in low light conditions. When both proprioception and the vestibular system are dysfunctional, any decrease in vision can be catastrophic. I believe this is one of the major reasons why falls become more common as we age. So what can we do about it? The simplest, yet most powerful intervention I've found is using Better Balance Orthotics. Putting them in your shoes immediately turns up the volume on the sensory feedback from the feet to the brain. Although I don't have direct research evidence of this yet, I suspect based on Imran's explanation of his and other research that this actually causes a rewiring in the brain, where more neurons are shifted back towards processing proprioceptive input rather than being diverted to the visual system. By the way, one of the reasons I was talking with Imran was to discuss the possibility of him and his colleagues at the New Zealand College of Chiropractic Research Department collaborating with us on researching Better Balance Orthotics. I'll keep you posted. Hopefully from what I've explained, it's clear that Better Balance Orthotics are not just about back pain, posture, or sports performance, although they are great for all of those things. They're really about something much more fundamental. They're about how we relate to gravity and the ground we walk on, which is something that affects every single one of your patients. So my question for you today is, how many of your patients don't know about Better Balance Orthotics and are missing out on better outcomes as a result, even if they don't have feet or balance problems? By the way, as I mentioned at the start of today's episode, I've been experimenting with improving my own balance. A friend and mentor of mine, Dr. Trevor Chikuti, has been pioneering the use of stroboscopic glasses, which selectively reduce visual input to train balance and other aspects of brain function, and he's getting some pretty impressive results. I've been training on a single foot wobble board, wearing glasses that reduce my visual input by 75% as part of my daily routine. This is them here. I'm happy to report that my vestibular scan has improved from moderately reduced back to mildly reduced. So like all of us, I'm a work in progress. I'm actually considering putting together an advanced balance training for practitioners. If that's something that you'd be interested in, just comment below and I'll add you to the list to let you know when it's ready. I'd also love to hear if you'd prefer it as an online training or a live workshop. That's it for today. Thanks. Have an awesome day.